Richard Haass is the President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations with me now. Richard, they're going to literally say, you said, this is, sorry, President Biden, this is exactly what we asked you, could this happen? And you said no, and look what's happened.
Yeah, he promised that America was back, and instead Donald Trump is back. This trip, as a result, has an air of melancholy over it. It's Joe Biden as a lame duck, and he's not in a position to reassure. It's not simply that he got it wrong 4 years ago, but he's not in a position to reassure, much less guarantee anything about the United States going forward. And it's not so much a problem for our foes. They'll have to deal with American unpredictability, Richard, but it's an enormous problem for our partners and allies because they depend on us. And reliability and predictability are the coin of the realm. And that coin may be in short supply in, 70 days?
But the president will say, no, I'm sorry, the typical elitist nonsense from Richard Haass and his colleagues of the at the council. Just what you'd expect. To those, and from Quest and the mainstream media, don't worry, I'm lumping myself in that as well. It's a big boat. Look, he will say, those who stand by us, those who support us, those who pay their way, we will be with you. But for those who freeload, those who don't do their America first, we're not.
Well, he will say that. But even if people were to do more, and they should do more, by the way, European allies, some of the Asia-Pacific allies ought to do more, not as a favor to us, but as a favor to themselves, given the threats posed by Russia, North Korea, and China. But even with that, there's an air of uncertainty about, for example, what the United States is prepared to do on behalf of European security in Ukraine. There's no clarity about what the United States might be willing to do, or China to coerce or use force against Taiwan. So again, I think you're looking at a very different American foreign policy, not just transactional in our relations, but essentially more unpredictable, which again is a real problem, I think, for our relationship with allies.
On APEC, and we saw just there the countries of APEC, the pivot, the so-called pivot of a previous generation, it looks very strange now, doesn't it? Because how those countries will accommodate a more muscular foreign policy from the United States, whilst worrying about their protection of the US nuclear umbrella, that's dangerous.
Yeah, there's a lot that's dangerous. For a lot of these countries, they've got to think about, will the United States be as much of an economic partner? Our position in APEC really for more than a decade now has been hobbled by Democratic and Republican inability or unwillingness alike to embrace free trade agreements. That's certainly not going to change. We're going to see tariffs and then tariffs on top of tariffs. So that's a reality. And yeah, the security side of the relationship, again, has become a little bit more uncertain. For a lot of these countries, they're going to have to decide, do they become more self-sufficient? Do they lean or tilt towards China? Do they try to find new partners? I think for them, it's extraordinarily disorienting. We've essentially had a world where the United States played an outsized role for 75, 80 years. We didn't always get it right, but we got it right more often than not. And I think that world is essentially coming to an end. Joe Biden will be, I think, seen by history as the last of the post-World War II presidents.
And if we take Europe, for example, the disarray in Europe at the moment, of course, we've got the stronger right in Italy, but the worrying part is the weakness of Macron in France with Barnier, and the seemingly complete collapse of the German government in Berlin. Without the and by the way, in Brussels, I mean, who knows what the position is in Brussels in terms of strengths and weaknesses. You know, I'm not going to quote Kissinger's famous line, but about who do you call when I want to speak to you. But it's never been more true than it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. Europe is in considerable disarray. One thing is, what impact will Donald Trump's election have on the politics inside European countries? Does it in some ways make it more plausible or more politically acceptable that they too move to a more populist right? I think quite possibly. And then also the real question is whether Europe is willing and able to to step up to meet the security challenges of Russia in particular, and I'm not sure.
Richard, finally, I just want to check. You've obviously been in touch with European leaders and European decision makers. Are they secretly saying, not that they'd ever say it publicly, are they secretly saying this is exactly what we feared and exactly what we knew was probably going to happen?
Many of them, not just in Europe, but around the world, are saying that. And they've had a long time to prepare for it, but they haven't really done a lot. And I think it was almost a case of collective avoidance. And a lot of them were hoping that the United States would not go down this path. Well, for better or worse, we have. And this is going to be a rude awakening, I would think, for a lot of America's partners in Europe, but also in other parts of the world.
I'm grateful to you, sir. I'm grateful. Thank you. I think we'll be talking a few more times over the next few years. You're going to be busy. Thank you, sir.
We very well might.
Thank you, sir.